The harsh glow of the fluorescent lights inside Ridgeway Medical Center's trauma unit left Ethan Walker's eyes burning as he sat stiffly in a molded plastic chair, his forearms still smeared with his son's dried blood. Less than an hour earlier, those same arms had been wrapped around Noah's limp body on the rocky slope below Hollowstone Bluff, Ethan's voice breaking as he whispered reassurances he no longer trusted himself to keep. Wind had whipped through the trees as the rescue helicopter descended through the mist, its blades scattering loose leaves and gravel across the ravine. Now, somewhere beyond the double doors in front of him, surgeons were fighting to save the life of his 9-year-old son. And Ethan could do nothing but wait. His phone vibrated in his hand. For a moment, he didn't register it. Then he looked down and saw the message. It was from Valerie Morton, his mother-in-law. Lydia's birthday supper is tomorrow. Do not embarrass the family by missing it. Ethan stared at the screen, reading the words again, as if repetition might somehow change their meaning. His child was in emergency surgery. Noah had fallen, or possibly slipped. The park warden hadn't been certain. Nearly 12 meters down a sheer rock face during what was meant to be a quiet weekend walk. And Valerie was concerned about a birthday supper. His hands shook as he typed. My son may not survive the night. The reply came almost immediately. If you don't show up, don't bother calling us family again. Something inside Ethan went cold, solid, and immovable. He blocked the number without replying and powered the phone off completely. In the dark reflection of the screen, he barely recognized himself. A 41-year-old environmental surveyor who had spent the last decade trying to keep a marriage intact long after it had stopped being equal. The waiting room door opened. Dr. Hannah Cole, still wearing surgical scrubs, approached him with the carefully neutral expression doctors wore when the outcome could still tip either way. Mr. Walker, she said gently, your son survived the operation. The next 72 hours are critical. He sustained a serious head injury, 3 fractured ribs, a punctured lung, and internal bleeding, which we've stabilized. He's unconscious, but currently stable. Ethan's legs nearly failed him. Can I see him? We're moving him into intensive care, shortly. She hesitated. There's something else I need to ask. Ethan looked up. When Noah was admitted, you said he fell during the walk. Some of his injuries, specifically the bruising on his upper arms, don't quite match a simple fall. What are you saying? Ethan asked quietly. In cases like this, we're required to ask whether anyone else had contact with the child before the incident. Ethan's mind replayed the weekend in fragments. They had been alone on the trail, but Noah had been restless since Friday, quiet, unusually alert, flinching at sudden noises. When they'd stopped at the overlook for lunch, Noah had said he felt dizzy and walked toward the trees to use the toilet. Moments later, Ethan heard the scream. No one else was there, he said, just us. Yet even as he spoke, a memory pressed at the edges of his thoughts. The night before they left, Lydia, his wife, had insisted on packing Noah's rucksack herself. She had even prepared a flask of sweetened cocoa, Noah's favorite. That alone was strange. Lydia rarely did small, thoughtful things without a reason. Noah had drunk from that flask less than half an hour before the fall. Dr. Cole nodded slowly. If anything else comes to mind, anything at all, you need to tell us. The intensive care unit hummed with machines and muted voices. Noah lay pale and motionless beneath thin sheets, tubes snaking from his arms and chest. A ventilator rose and fell in steady rhythm beside him. Ethan pulled a chair close and carefully took his son's hand. I'm here, mate, he whispered. Dad's right here. He stayed until exhaustion forced him out. On the second day, after finally switching his phone back on, Ethan was met with a flood of notifications. 12 missed calls, all from Lydia. None mentioned Noah. Every message focused on Ethan's absence from the birthday supper, his lack of respect, his selfish priorities. On the third day, Daniel Brooks arrived with coffee and a clean shirt. Daniel was a criminal solicitor, sharp-eyed, methodical, and loyal to a fault. They'd been friends since university, long before Ethan married Lydia. You look dreadful, Daniel said quietly. He woke briefly yesterday, Ethan replied. Couldn't speak because of the tube, but he squeezed my hand. That's a good sign, Daniel said, sitting down. A very good sign. After a pause, he added, Lydia's been calling me. Ethan looked at him. Did she ask about Noah? Daniel didn't answer. And in that silence, Ethan understood something he could no longer deny. Whatever lay behind his son's fall, it wasn't just an accident, and whatever waited for him when Noah finally woke, it would change everything. "That's what I feared," Ethan Walker said quietly. He had been married to Lydia Walker for 12 years, and during that time he had watched her change from the woman he believed he knew into someone increasingly distant, rigid, and controlled. Or perhaps this was the thought that kept him awake most nights. She had never truly changed at all. Perhaps she had always been this person, and he had simply chosen not to see it. They had met at a colleague's retirement party in Sheffield. Lydia had been warm then, elegant, attentive, quick to smile. She laughed at his awkward jokes, asked about his work in environmental surveying, and made him feel briefly like he mattered more than anything else in her world. They married within a year. Noah was born 3 years later. That was when the shift became impossible to ignore. At first, Ethan blamed exhaustion, new motherhood, the emotional toll of adjusting to life with a child. Lydia became critical, tightly controlled, obsessed with how things appeared, how the house looked, how Noah behaved, how others perceived her as a mother. But the real authority in their household had never been Lydia. It was Valerie Morton, Lydia's mother. Valerie had once been a prominent figure in local charity circles, admired and feared in equal measure. When age began to edge her out of relevance, she redirected her need for control inward, toward her daughter's marriage, her grandson's upbringing, every decision that mattered. Lydia's father, Martin, was a quiet man who had learned long ago that opposing his wife only prolonged the conflict. What Ethan hadn't understood until far too late was that by marrying Lydia, he had also submitted himself to Valerie's rule. Where they lived, what school Noah attended, which doctors were consulted, which friends were appropriate. Sunday lunches at Valerie's house were compulsory. Charity galas were obligations. Even Noah's extracurricular activities were decided by committee, a committee made up of Valerie and Lydia, with Ethan's input acknowledged politely and ignored entirely. The only thing Ethan had ever truly fought for, and won, was his monthly walking trip with Noah. Those weekends were their refuge, 2 days away from criticism, judgment, and suffocating expectations. Just father and son. And until recently, Noah had loved them. Until recently. "Ethan," Daniel Brooks said carefully, "I've known you long enough to hear it when something's wrong. What is it?" Ethan set his coffee down with a steady hand. "Noah's been ill," he said. "Often, more than a child should be." Daniel nodded. "Kids get run down." That's what everyone said. Doctors blamed allergies, stress, a sensitive stomach. Ethan hesitated. But Lydia always seemed pleased. She took him from specialist to specialist, posted updates online, collected sympathy. Daniel frowned. "That's narcissism. You've known that for years." "It's more than that," Ethan said quietly. "Last month, I took Noah to a pediatrician. Lydia didn't choose, Dr. Desai." Daniel leaned in. "He ran every test imaginable, blood panels, toxicology screening, neurological exams." Ethan swallowed. There was nothing wrong with him. Noah was perfectly healthy. And then? The following week, he was sick again, violently, vomiting, fever, dizzy. Ethan's voice dropped. It happened right after dinner. Daniel's posture changed. "Ethan, what are you suggesting?" "I don't know," Ethan said, "but Dr. Cole asked me if anyone else had contact with Noah before the fall, and I can't stop thinking about that flask Lydia packed. The cocoa." Noah drank it. Daniel's jaw tightened. 20 minutes later, Ethan continued, he said the ground was moving, that his head felt strange, and then he fell. "Jesus Christ," Daniel said, "that's not a small accusation." "I know," Ethan replied. "That's why I haven't said it out loud until now." He glanced through the glass into the ICU. "But what if I'm right?" he whispered. "What if she?" A nurse appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Walker," she said softly, "your son is waking." Ethan was on his feet instantly. Noah's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and frightened. The ventilator had been removed earlier that morning, replaced by an oxygen mask. "Dad," Noah whispered. "I'm here," Ethan said, taking his hand. "I'm right here. You're safe." Tears slid down Noah's cheeks. "I'm sorry," he said. Ethan shook his head. "You've done nothing wrong." Noah's fingers tightened with surprising strength. "No," he insisted. "You need to know." "Easy, mate," Ethan said gently. "Just rest." "No." Noah tried to sit up, wincing as pain flared. "I heard them." Ethan froze. "Heard who?" "Mum and Grandma," Noah whispered. "The night before we left." The heart monitor quickened. "I couldn't sleep," Noah said. "I went downstairs for water. They were in the kitchen." Slow down, Ethan said, though his chest felt tight. What did they say? Noah swallowed hard. Grandma said you were the problem, that I was difficult. His breathing became shallow. Mum was crying. She said she couldn't keep doing it. Ethan felt his blood run cold. And then Grandma said, Noah hesitated. She said accidents happen. That insurance exists for a reason. The room seemed to tilt. She said, Noah whispered, some problems solve themselves. Ethan closed his eyes, not in disbelief, but in confirmation, because suddenly everything made sense and nothing ever would again. That accidents happen all the time, Noah whispered. That if something happened to me on the walking trip, no one would question it. The room seemed to tilt. Daniel Brooks moved closer, every trace of casual friendliness gone, replaced by the sharp stillness of a solicitor who suddenly understood the gravity of what he was hearing. Noah, Ethan said, his voice calm despite the ice spreading through his veins. Are you saying they planned for you to get hurt? Noah swallowed hard. The cocoa tasted wrong, he said. Bitter. I didn't want to drink it, but Mum told me I had to. She watched me, made sure I finished it. Ethan's chest tightened. And then? My head started spinning, Noah whispered. Everything felt slow. When we stopped at the cliff, I tried to hold onto the tree, but my hands wouldn't work. I fell, Dad. I didn't jump. Tears spilled down his cheeks. It wasn't an accident. They made it happen. The heart monitor shrieked as Noah's pulse spiked. Nurses rushed in, gently guiding Ethan away as Dr. Helen Cole appeared at the bedside, issuing calm, clipped instructions. Sedation was ordered to prevent further distress. Even as they worked, Noah kept reaching for his father. Don't let them take me home, he cried. Please, Dad, don't let Mum and Grandma take me. They'll try again. I know they will. Ethan gripped his son's hand. No one is taking you anywhere, he said, his voice breaking. You're safe. I swear to you, you're safe. They sedated Noah moments later. Daniel pulled Ethan into the corridor. We need to call the police, Daniel said quietly. And say what? Ethan replied. A traumatized child's statement while on heavy medication? Lydia will say he was confused, hallucinating. Daniel didn't argue. So what do we do? He asked. Ethan looked through the glass at his son, small, bruised, fighting for his life. Something inside him shifted. For years, he had convinced himself that staying married was stability, that keeping the peace was protecting his child. He had been wrong, and Noah had nearly died because of it. We get proof, Ethan said quietly. Whatever it takes, we get proof, and we stop them. The next morning, Ethan took a calculated risk. He rang Lydia and told her Noah was asking for her. It was a lie. But Ethan needed to see her reaction, needed to look into her eyes. She arrived 2 hours later, immaculate as always, with Valerie Morton beside her. They moved through the hospital corridors like royalty, flowers in hand, concern carefully arranged on their faces. Where is he? Lydia demanded. Where's my son? Ethan led them into Noah's room. Noah was awake but quiet, coached gently by Ethan and Daniel to stay still. As Lydia approached the bed, Noah's fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around Ethan's hand. Oh, my poor baby, Lydia cooed, reaching for his face. Noah flinched. It was subtle, almost invisible. But Ethan saw it, and he saw something colder flicker in Lydia's eyes before it vanished behind a smile. He's been through severe trauma, Dr. Cole said from the doorway. We're limiting stimulation. I'm his mother, Valerie snapped. We're hardly a danger to him. Hospital policy applies to everyone, Dr. Cole replied evenly. The visit lasted 15 minutes. They barely asked about Noah's injuries. Instead, they spoke of how traumatic this had been for them, how worried they were, how Ethan had failed to keep his son safe. As they left, Valerie turned sharply. We need to discuss when he's coming home. He'll need full-time care. He's staying here, Ethan said calmly, as long as the doctors decide. A look passed between Lydia and Valerie, a look that confirmed everything Noah had said. We'll discuss this later, Lydia said coldly, when you're being reasonable. That afternoon, Daniel returned with someone Ethan hadn't expected. Rachel Donnelly, former National Crime Agency investigator, now a private consultant. Daniel didn't waste time. If what your son said is true, this is attempted murder. Rachel nodded. How long has Noah been ill? 18 months, Ethan said, but worse in the last 6. I'll need all his medical records, she said, and access to your house. Lydia will never allow that. Rachel smiled thinly. Who said anything about asking? Over the next 2 days, Ethan learned that his marriage had been a carefully constructed lie. Rachel worked quickly, comparing Noah's symptoms with known poisoning patterns. The results were chilling: recurring nausea, dizziness, weakness, fever, all cyclical, all appearing when Noah was home. "Look at this," Rachel said, spreading documents across the hospital table. "Every time Noah stayed with your parents, his symptoms disappeared." Ethan stared. His parents lived hundreds of miles away and saw Noah only a few times a year. "But she's right," Rachel continued. "Those are the only periods where his medical records show full recovery." Ethan's stomach dropped. Rachel continued digging. Household receipts showed purchases of over-the-counter medications known to cause dizziness in small doses. Lydia's search history, accessed legally through shared devices, contained alarming queries. Can poisoning look like illness? Child dizziness without detection. Life Insurance Child Accidental Death UK. The final blow came when Rachel accessed the family's insurance records. Noah had been insured. Recently, for a sum far beyond necessity. Ethan closed his eyes. The police were contacted that evening. Noah was moved to a protected ward. Lydia and Valerie were denied further access. When confronted, Lydia collapsed into tears, claiming stress, confusion, a misunderstanding. Valerie said nothing. Her silence was worse. Within days, the case escalated. Rachel uncovered prior reports, dismissed complaints from teachers, notes from doctors that never quite added up. A pattern, a system. When detectives searched the house, they found residue in the thermos. The same compound identified in Noah's blood work. Lydia was arrested at work. Valerie was arrested 2 hours later. Noah recovered slowly. Physically, the healing was steady. Emotionally, it took longer. One evening, weeks later, Noah looked at his father. "Are they gone?" he asked. "They can't hurt you anymore," Ethan replied. Noah nodded. "I knew you'd come back for me," he said quietly. Ethan pulled him close. "I should never have left you alone," he whispered. Months later, the trial concluded. Lydia accepted a plea deal. Valerie was convicted. The media called it shocking. Ethan called it overdue. And for the first time in a long time, when he looked at his son sleeping peacefully beside him, he knew one thing with certainty. Some accidents aren't accidents at all. They're warnings. And this time, he had listened. "What about the hot chocolate?" Ethan Walker asked, his voice low and controlled. Rachel Donnelly didn't hesitate. "I had Daniel get an emergency warrant. The police seized your camping gear yesterday. They found the thermos. It's being tested now, but if I had to bet, I'd say there's a sedative in it, possibly combined with something that affects balance and coordination." Ethan closed his eyes. "Why?" he asked quietly. "Why would they do this?" Rachel leaned back, tapping her tablet. "That's where it gets interesting. I pulled financial records. Don't ask how. Your wife and her mother have been living well beyond their means." She slid the tablet across the table. On paper, the Morton family looks respectable. In reality, they're drowning. Valerie's shopping addiction, failed investments, credit cards stacked on top of loans. They've been borrowing to maintain appearances. "I had no idea," Ethan murmured. "They made sure you didn't. But here's the part that matters." Rachel zoomed in on a document. "You have a life insurance policy, £2 million, and Noah has one as well." Ethan's stomach dropped. "1 million, Rachel continued, with Lydia Walker listed as the sole beneficiary. Ethan felt physically sick. "She convinced me to sign those years ago," he said. "Said it was sensible, responsible." "And something almost did happen to Noah," Rachel said softly. "On a hiking trip where only the two of you were present, where an accident would make perfect sense." She leaned forward. "But I don't think Noah was the primary target." Ethan looked up sharply. "What?" "Think about it," Rachel said. "Noah falls. You're distraught. Maybe you try to climb down after him. Maybe you lose your footing. Or later, driving back through narrow mountain roads, exhausted and devastated, you make a mistake." She let the silence stretch. Lydia becomes the grieving widow and mother. £3 million, enough to erase every debt and start over. Daniel, who had been silent until now, spoke quietly. "The messages support this. Valerie and Lydia weren't worried about Noah. They were furious you missed the birthday dinner. Furious that you were still alive." Ethan swallowed. "If Noah died but I lived," he said slowly, "they'd still get the million. But they needed us both gone to maximize the payout." "Exactly," Rachel said. She swiped again. "There's more." An old newspaper clipping filled the screen. Before you met Lydia, Rachel continued, she worked as a nanny for a wealthy family. Their 5-year-old daughter became seriously ill under her care. Weeks in hospital. Doctors never found a cause. Ethan stared. They fired her, Rachel said. No charges. I tracked down the mother. She wouldn't speak on record, but off the record, she said she always suspected Lydia was making the child sick for attention. Munchausen by proxy, Daniel said quietly. Combined with greed, Rachel added. Lydia learned from her mother that love is transactional. Everything has a price, and you and Noah had very clear ones. Ethan stood abruptly, needing air, space, something solid to hold onto. He had spent years explaining away Lydia's behavior. Stress, her mother's influence, difficulties after childbirth. The truth was simpler and far worse. She had always been this person. What do we do now? He asked. Rachel's smile was sharp and cold. Now? Now we give them exactly what they wanted. The thermos results came back 3 days later. Positive. A prescription-strength sedative combined with a compound known to cause acute vertigo. At that altitude, Rachel said, it would hit fast. He never stood a chance. Can we trace it to Lydia? Ethan asked. Not directly, Rachel replied, but I have something better. She pulled up a new folder. Your house has security cameras, she said. You knew about the front door and living room. What you didn't know is that there were more, hidden ones. Ethan felt his skin crawl. Why would she? Insurance fraud, leverage, control. Doesn't matter. Rachel met his eyes. What matters is that they've been recording for 3 years. She pressed play. The footage showed the kitchen late at night, date stamped 2 days before the camping trip. Lydia sat at the table, hands shaking. Valerie Morton sat opposite her, calm, composed. I can't keep doing this, Lydia whispered. The lying, the planning. I'm exhausted. You'll do what needs to be done, Valerie replied coolly. We're too far in to stop now. The debts. Won't wait, Valerie cut in. And Ethan will never just hand over money. He's too careful. Maybe if I just asked for a divorce? And get half of almost nothing? Valerie scoffed. The house is in his name. His pension is protected. You'd be lucky to walk away with $100,000. That doesn't save us. Lydia started crying. But Noah is my son. I do love him. Valerie's voice hardened. Love doesn't pay bills. She leaned forward. The plan is simple. Noah has the accident. You're the grieving mother. Ethan, in his distress, isn't careful driving home. Those roads are dangerous. And if he doesn't crash? Lydia asked. Valerie shrugged. Grief leads to many tragic outcomes. Alcohol, pills, accidents. We can be patient. The video continued. Hours of footage. Calm discussions. No anger, no hesitation, just planning. Rachel stopped the playback. This is enough to bury them, she said. The police moved fast. Lydia was arrested at her workplace the following morning. Valerie was taken in that afternoon. The footage made national news. Mother and grandmother charged in insurance-driven plot to kill child, the headline read. Noah never had to testify. Ethan made sure of that. Months later, Noah sat beside his father in the small garden behind their rented cottage, wrapped in a blanket, watching the late afternoon light. They're gone, right? Noah asked. They can't hurt you anymore, Ethan said. Noah nodded, then leaned into his father. I knew you'd believe me, he said softly. Ethan closed his eyes. I should have believed sooner, he replied. That's on me. Noah shook his head. You came back, he said. That's what matters. Ethan held him tighter. And for the first time since the hospital lights burned into his eyes, since blood stained his hands, since his world cracked open, he believed it too. This is evidence, Seth said, his face pale as he stared at the screen. This is a straight line to prison. Only if it's admissible, Kelly replied calmly. Some of this came from a legal search. Some didn't. A good barrister could tear it apart, and Valerie Morton has very good lawyers. Ethan folded his arms. So what do we do with it? Kelly's eyes hardened. We copy it, several copies, and we use it as leverage. Seth frowned. Leverage for what? For something better than prison, Kelly said. Prison ends. What I have in mind is permanent. She laid out the plan slowly, methodically. It was ruthless, but precise. Not revenge for the sake of anger. Justice designed to destroy exactly what Lydia and Valerie valued most. Reputation, money, control, and the illusion of respectability. But first, they had to believe they'd won. Noah was discharged from hospital 2 weeks later. Ethan didn't take him home. Instead, he booked an extended stay hotel near Seth's office. He told Lydia it was temporary, just until Noah was stronger. She protested, of course, but Ethan held firm. The lie bought him time to dismantle her life piece by piece. The finances came first. Ethan had always been careful with money. Years of engineering had trained him to spot patterns. What he hadn't realized until Kelly dug deep was that Lydia had been siphoning money for years. Small amounts, clever amounts. £3,000 here for school support. £5,000 there for medical consultations that never happened. Charges on Ethan's card disguised as household expenses. Kelly traced it all. £22,000 for Valerie's medical care, actually gambling debts. £14,500 for Noah's therapy, which Noah had never attended. Cash withdrawals timed to coincide with Lydia's charity appearances. Over 8 years, it totaled more than £180,000. We could add this to the criminal case, Seth said. No, Ethan replied. We use it. He filed for divorce, but not quietly, not privately. He filed on grounds of fraud, coercive control, and criminal endangerment. Attached were Noah's hospital records, medical reports showing Noah's sudden improvement when away from his mother. A sworn statement from Noah himself. The filing became public record. Kelly made sure it landed on the right desk, a journalist who specialized in family court scandals. The headline ran 3 days later. Local mother accused of poisoning son for insurance money. Lydia's carefully curated online life collapsed overnight. Comments flooded in. Some defended her, many didn't. Doubt spread. Questions followed. Her charity friends went silent. Then Ethan turned his attention to Valerie. The Morton Children's Trust looked impressive on paper. Annual galas, wealthy donors, smiling photographs. Kelly's investigation told a different story. Less than 12% of donations reached children. The rest vanished into administrative costs that matched Valerie's personal spending almost exactly. Ethan sent the full dossier to the Charity Commission, then to HMRC, then to every major donor from the last 5 years. The fallout was immediate. The trust was shut down pending investigation. Accounts frozen. Valerie's friends distanced themselves overnight. Even her husband, Noah's grandfather, filed for divorce and moved out of the country. But Ethan wasn't finished. Using the hidden footage, Kelly built a timeline of Lydia and Valerie discussing the plan. She couldn't submit it directly to court, but she could use it where it mattered. Seth arranged a meeting. Barrister to barrister. He played just enough of the recording. Valerie's voice filled the room. Accidents happen all the time, and £3 million solves everything. Lydia's lawyer went pale. Your client attempted to murder her husband and son, Seth said evenly. We have medical proof, witness testimony, and recordings. If this goes to trial, she's facing decades. What do you want? The lawyer asked quietly. Full custody of Noah for my client. No access, no visitation. She forfeits all financial claims. She pleads to fraud and endangerment. She testifies against her mother. The lawyer swallowed. You're asking her to destroy her own mother. She tried to convince her to kill her own child, Seth replied. I think that line was crossed first. The negotiations dragged on for 2 weeks. Lydia fought, manipulated, threatened, but she misunderstood something vital. Ethan Walker was no longer the man she'd married. That man had chased peace. This man wanted truth. The final blow came from Noah. Now safe, now clear-headed. Noah wrote a letter to the family court judge. In it, he described the pills his mother made him take, how they made him dizzy and sick, how she smiled when he was ill, how she posted photos of him in hospital beds for sympathy, how he overheard the conversation about making his death look like an accident. No drama, no exaggeration, just a child telling the truth. The judge read the letter in chambers. Lydia's lawyer walked out and told her to sign. She signed on a Friday afternoon, hands shaking, eyes hollow. She looked smaller somehow, reduced. You'll regret this, Lydia hissed at Ethan. You've made an enemy of my mother. Valerie doesn't lose, she added. Neither do I, Ethan said quietly. Not anymore. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. The immaculate polish that had once defined Lydia Walker was gone, cracked open to reveal something desperate, sharp-edged, and mean beneath the surface. Her hands shook as she signed the final custody papers, officially relinquishing all parental rights to Noah. You're going to regret this, she said, her voice low and venomous. You think you've won, but you've just made an enemy of my mother. Ethan didn't react. Valerie doesn't lose, Lydia added, her eyes flashing. Neither do I, Ethan replied quietly. Not anymore. Lydia laughed once, hollow and brittle, before being led away. Valerie Morton's trial began 6 months later. The prosecution didn't miss a step. They laid out the financial records first, years of debt hidden beneath designer handbags and charity galas. Then came testimony from the family whose daughter Lydia had nannied years before, the mother speaking through tears as she described months of unexplained illness that vanished the moment Lydia was dismissed. Medical experts followed, calmly explaining how Noah's symptoms matched deliberate, low-dose poisoning over time, how the cycles of illness aligned perfectly with periods spent at home, how it would have been easy to dismiss until it nearly killed him. And finally, Lydia herself. As part of her plea deal, she testified against her mother. She spoke quietly, avoiding Ethan's eyes, confirming the insurance policies, the financial pressure, the planning. She admitted she had agreed, hesitated, yes, cried, yes, but agreed. What the prosecution didn't officially present was the hidden camera footage. They didn't need to. The circumstantial evidence was overwhelming. Ethan attended every day of the trial, not out of anger, out of resolve. He wanted Valerie to see him, to see Noah, healthy, alive, sitting beside him with a book, laughing during recess breaks. He wanted her to understand that her plan had failed completely and that its consequences were permanent. On the stand, Valerie attempted dignity. She claimed she'd only been protecting her daughter, that she'd never intended for anyone to die, that the conversations had been exaggerated. Just venting. But when the prosecutor played legally obtained audio from Lydia's cooperation, open quote, "Accidents happen all the time, and £3 million solves all our problems," close quote. The jury's expressions hardened into stone. The verdict came quickly. Guilty on all counts: conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, insurance fraud. The judge did not hide his disgust. 25 years, he said coldly. Valerie screamed as she was led away, screamed about betrayal, about injustice, about Ethan destroying her family. The doors closed, and Ethan felt nothing. No satisfaction, no rage, just a quiet, final sense of closure. 18 months after that night in the hospital, Ethan stood in the back garden of his new home, watching Noah play basketball with Daniel's nephew. The house was smaller than the one he'd shared with Lydia, but it was theirs. No hidden cameras, no walking on eggshells, no poison disguised as care. "Dad, watch this," Noah shouted, sinking a clean three-pointer. "Nice shot," Ethan said, smiling. Physically, Noah had recovered fully. Emotionally, healing had taken longer, but Ethan had made sure his son had the best trauma therapist available. Slowly, steadily, the nightmares faded. The fear loosened its grip. A new school, new friends, a real childhood. That evening, Rachel Donnelly stopped by with a bottle of wine and a satisfied smile. "Thought you'd want to know," she said. "The Morton Foundation investigation wrapped up. Valerie's ordered to repay over £800,000 in misappropriated funds. Since she's in prison, they're seizing everything: the house, the cars, the accounts." "Good," Ethan said simply. "And Lydia?" Rachel asked, settling into a garden chair. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Finished her sentence last month," Rachel continued. "She tried to reach out to Noah." "What did she say?" "Just a letter. Said therapy changed her. Said she wanted a relationship." Rachel paused. Noah tore it up, didn't read past the first paragraph. Ethan exhaled slowly. "I should have." "You should have nothing," Rachel interrupted gently. "He made his own choice. That's healthy." Rachel sipped her wine. "She's living with a cousin in Nevada now, working retail. No social media, no charities, no wealthy friends. Just surviving." It was, Ethan reflected, a perfectly calibrated punishment. Lydia and Valerie had worshipped status, above love, above family, above basic decency. Now Valerie was imprisoned, stripped of power and reputation, and Lydia was free, but invisible. "Do you ever feel guilty?" Rachel asked quietly. "For destroying them so completely?" Ethan watched Noah laugh, alive and whole and safe. "They tried to kill my son," he said. "They would have succeeded if I'd been 5 minutes later reaching him after the fall." He shook his head. "No, I feel relief and gratitude that I finally stopped being passive." Daniel arrived later with takeaway, and the three of them sat outside as the sun dipped below the trees, talking about nothing important at all. Normal conversation, normal life, the kind Ethan once took for granted and now cherished. That night, after everyone left and Noah was asleep, Ethan stood quietly in his son's doorway, watching him breathe. The nightmares were gone. The fear had faded. Noah was healing. And Ethan had learned something essential. Being a good man did not mean being endlessly accommodating. Forgiveness was not the same as enabling. Keeping the peace was not worth the price of a child's safety. Lydia had texted him once, months after her release. 2 words, "I'm sorry." Ethan deleted it without replying. Sorry wasn't enough. Sorry didn't undo the poison. Sorry didn't erase the plan to murder them both. Action mattered. Protection mattered. Noah mattered. The next day was Saturday. Ethan took Noah hiking, not to Blackstone Ridge, but to an easy trail near the lake. Gentle paths, open views, safety. At the summit overlook, Noah stood quietly for a moment. "Dad," he said, "can I ask you something?" "Anything, buddy." Noah hesitated. "Do you think Mum really loved me? Even a little?" It was the question Ethan had been dreading, and the one he answered with complete honesty. Ethan had rehearsed the answer with Noah's therapist many times. "I think your mum is ill," he said gently. Not ill in a way that excuses what she did, but ill in a way that made her unable to love properly. Anyone, even herself. Noah looked up at him, searching his face. "So, it wasn't my fault?" Ethan's chest tightened. "God, no." He pulled his son into a hug, holding him firmly. "Nothing that happened was your fault. You were a child. You are a child. You deserved a mother who protected you, not one who hurt you." Noah rested his forehead against Ethan's shoulder. "I'm glad I have you," he said quietly. "I'm glad I have you too," Ethan replied. They stood together at the overlook, the wind lifting their hair, the valley stretching out below them, wide, open, full of light. This was healing. This was victory. Not the convictions, not the prison sentences, not the financial ruin Lydia and Valerie had brought upon themselves. This moment, peace, safety, truth, this was what winning really looked like. On the walk back down, Noah talked about school, his classes, friends, a girl he might like, normal worries, beautiful, ordinary problems Ethan once feared he might never hear. That night, Ethan finalized his will, drafted with Daniel's help. Everything went to Noah. Daniel and Rachel were named trustees until Noah turned 25. Lydia's name appeared nowhere in the document. She tried once, through her solicitor, to ask about visitation. Daniel shut it down immediately. The agreement Lydia had signed terminated all parental rights. She had chosen money over her child, and now she would live with that choice forever. Sometimes, late at night, Ethan wondered if he had gone too far, if he had been too ruthless in dismantling their lives so completely. Then he remembered the thermos filled with poisoned cocoa. He remembered Noah's small, terrified voice in the hospital. "Don't let them take me home." He remembered the hidden cameras, the insurance policies, the casual way Valerie had discussed killing her own grandson. No, he had gone exactly as far as necessary. A year later, the final piece of the puzzle arrived in the post. A handwritten letter. The return address belonged to Virginia Hernandez, the mother of the child Lydia had once cared for as a nanny. "I always knew," the letter read. "I always knew Lydia was making my daughter ill, but I couldn't prove it. My husband thought I was paranoid. When we finally dismissed her, our daughter began to recover. We didn't want to put her through an investigation. I've regretted that decision every day since. Thank you for being brave enough to fight. You saved your son. You may have saved others too." Ethan folded the letter carefully and placed it in his desk drawer. He never showed it to Noah. Some truths were for fathers to carry alone. 2 years after the trial, Ethan met Clara Hughes, a teacher at Noah's school. She was kind, grounded, genuinely uninterested in money, status, or drama. She made Ethan laugh. She made Noah laugh. When Ethan eventually told her the whole story, every dark, painful detail, she didn't flinch. She understood that a man who had fought that hard for his child was someone worth knowing. They took it slowly, carefully. Ethan had learned the danger of rushing into anything built on charm rather than truth. A new life formed, not dramatic, not flashy, but solid, honest, safe. Noah approved of Clara. That was all that mattered. One Sunday evening, during a quiet dinner at home, Noah said something that made Ethan's heart ache. "It's nice having family dinners here," Noah said. "Not like at Grandma's house." Clara smiled gently. "Different how?" Noah thought for a moment. "Everyone's happy. No one's angry all the time. No one's keeping score." He paused. "And Dad doesn't look scared." Ethan felt the truth of it settle deep in his chest. He had been scared for years. Scared of Valerie's judgment. Scared of Lydia's moods. Scared of rocking the boat. That fear had nearly cost him everything. Not scared anymore, Ethan said quietly. Not ever again. 5 years after that terrible camping trip, Ethan stood at Noah's secondary school graduation, watching his son accept an award for academic excellence. Noah was 15 now, tall, confident, curious. He talked about studying engineering like his father, about building things that lasted, about solving problems instead of avoiding them. What Lydia and Valerie had done had not broken him. It had sharpened him, made him stronger, more aware, more appreciative of kindness, honesty, and safety. As the applause filled the hall, Noah looked out into the crowd and found Ethan. Their eyes met. No words were needed. Ethan knew with absolute certainty that everything he had endured, every sleepless night, every court date, every painful truth, had been worth it. His son was safe. His son was free. And the cycle had ended with him. Valerie Martin was still in prison. She would be eligible for parole in 8 years, but Ethan had already made his decision. He would attend every parole hearing, every single one. He would make sure the board understood exactly who Valerie was and what she was capable of. Some people deserved second chances. Valerie was not one of them. Lydia had moved again, this time to Florida. Ethan had heard she was using her maiden name now, hiding from her past, working a quiet job in a grocery store. A small life. A life stripped of the status and admiration she had once chased so desperately. It was nothing like the future she had imagined for herself. And Ethan? Ethan had remarried. Clara had become his wife 2 years earlier in a simple ceremony. No extravagance, no audience, just family and a few close friends. Noah had walked them both down the aisle, beaming as if it were his own wedding. They had a daughter now, Emma, 18 months old, with Clara's dark eyes and Ethan's stubborn determination. She laughed easily, slept peacefully, and had never known a home filled with fear. Life was good, not perfect. Life never was, but honest, solid, built on a foundation that could not be shaken by lies, manipulation, or secrets. That night, after Noah's graduation party, Ethan found his son sitting alone on the back porch, staring up at the stars. "You okay, mate?" Ethan asked. "Yeah," Noah said, "just thinking." He hesitated, then added, "I Googled Mum the other day." Ethan's stomach tightened, but he didn't interrupt. "She works at a grocery shop," Noah continued. "Looks older than she is. Sad, I guess." Noah was quiet for a moment. "I don't feel bad for her," he said. "Is that wrong?" Ethan shook his head gently. "No, it's human. She hurt you in a way that can't be undone. You don't owe her forgiveness." Noah looked at him. "Do you forgive her?" Ethan considered the question carefully. "I don't think about her enough to forgive or not forgive," he said honestly. "She's just someone who used to be in our lives, someone who made terrible choices and faced consequences." Noah nodded. "That's good," he said, "because I'm done wasting energy on people who didn't care about me. I'd rather focus on the ones who do." Ethan pulled him into a sideways hug. "When did you get so wise?" Noah smiled faintly. "I have a good teacher." They sat there together, father and son, survivors of a nightmare that had almost destroyed them. The path from that harsh hospital waiting room to this quiet, peaceful evening had been long and painful. There were moments Ethan had wondered if he'd gone too far, if his fight for justice had turned him into something he hated. But then he would look at Noah, healthy, confident, safe. And he knew the truth. Monsters destroyed for pleasure or profit. Ethan had fought for survival, for justice, for his son's life. And that made all the difference. The stars wheeled overhead, the same stars that had watched from above Blackstone Ridge on that terrible day years ago. But Ethan was no longer that man. No longer passive. No longer afraid. No longer willing to ignore evil in the name of peace. He was a father who had fought back, who had refused to let darkness win, who had protected his child at any cost. As Noah stood and headed inside, he called back over his shoulder, "Love you, Dad." Ethan smiled softly. "Love you too." And he knew, without hesitation, that he would do it all again. Every hard choice, every sleepless night, every ruthless decision. Because that's what fathers do. They protect, they fight, they win. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Ethan Stories. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I'll see you in the next one.